Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess. Today is the intro for a new video series that I'm going to be doing on my channel. Fingers crossed, all being well. I wanted to challenge myself this year and do something in terms of my reading that I've never done before, and I'm going to be reading the 2022 Women's Prize for Fiction longlist. So whether a book has won an award, whether it's been nominated for an award, whether it's been on the long list or the short list, it's not usually something that I pay attention to. It's just happenstance if I pick up a book that has that kind of accolade. But I was looking at, I follow the Women's Prize on Instagram, and I was looking at some of the books and I was like, they sound really interesting. And then some of the other books I thought would push me a little bit out of my reading comfort zone. So I thought, hey, why not try and read all 16 and see how I get on? So that is what I'm going to do. Hopefully I will be successful. Hopefully I will be able to stick with it. What I'm going to do, because there are 16, I'm going to try and read 4 books every 2 months. So what we should end up with is 4 vlogs, each with me reading 4 books. There is no rhyme or reason to the order that I've picked to read these books, and this just happens to be the first set of 4. I do also own the second set of 4. As I'm seeing them out and about, I'm just kind of picking them up. I do have a list of all the books on my phone so I can track my progress as well. So I'm going to really quickly talk you through these first 4. Don't actually know that much about what they are about, so we're going to go on a little bit of a learning journey together. So yeah, this is the first vlog, and hopefully all being well, we'll be successful. So the first book we have is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Cooper Smith. This is dual timeline historical fiction. First of all, can we admire how stunning that cover is? It's really, really beautiful, and it's been blurbed by Madeline Miller, or which you could see if Waterstones hadn't put a sticker right across the front. Madeline Miller being one of my all-time favourite authors. So this is about 2 young Vietnamese women who go missing decades apart. So we have a 1986 timeline when the teenage daughter of a wealthy Vietnamese family gets lost in an abandoned rubber plantation while fleeing her angry father. And then we have a 2011 timeline, so 25 years later, a young, unhappy Vietnamese American disappears from her new home in Saigon without a trace. And I'm guessing that somehow these 2 stories are going to be interlinked. So there's that one. Then we have Careless by Kirsty Capes, which is a contemporary about a young girl who finds herself pregnant. On a hot, sticky day in June, Bess finds out she's pregnant. She could tell her social worker Henry, but he's useless. She should tell her foster mother Lisa, but she won't understand. She really ought to tell Boy, but she hasn't spoken to him in weeks. So I think this is a contemporary coming of age. It sounds very, very fascinating. Not very long, and probably not the type of book that I would usually reach for and pick up, so that's quite an interesting option. Then we have Remote Sympathy by Catherine Chidgey, which honestly was one of the most difficult books for me to get hold of. So I kind of created my lists in a really random way and then just set out to try and find these 4 books. Could not find a copy of this. Basically every bookshop online or in person that I went into, they just said they didn't have any copies of it. Eventually managed to get hold of one in Waterstones, and now it's everywhere. So I think I was just a little bit too keen and too early. So this is historical fiction. It is World War historical fiction about the Holocaust. So we have our main character Greta, whose husband takes up a powerful new position as a concentration camps administrator, and she basically develops a friendship and alliance with one of the prisoners at the concentration camp. So it gives me a little bit of Boy in the Striped Pyjamas type vibes. Again, this is right on my street, World War historical fiction. Very much looking forward to this one. And then this final book is also firmly within my comfort zone. So we're starting with just a little bit of a challenge. We have This One Sky Day by Leonie Ross. This is I don't want to say magical realism, I think it's fantasy. So it's set on an island called Popisho. The world is stirring awake again, each resident with their own list of things to do. A wedding feast to cook, an infidelity to investigate, a lost soul to set free, and two star-crossed lovers must try to find their way back to one another across this single day. I think I'm right in saying that basically every day everything resets, everyone's memories reset, that kind of thing. So I'm feeling like it's more fantasy than magical realism. But yes, I'm actually going to start with this one, staying firmly within my comfort zone, primarily because I was able to get this on audiobook. I couldn't get any of the other three on Scribd or from my library, whereas I could get this one on Scribd. So we ease into it more gently, and I should be able to get through it quite quickly if I can listen to it, and we will see how we go on. Ignore this mess that you can see in the corner there that you probably wouldn't have noticed had I not just pointed it out to you. We're decorating the hallway, everything is a mess, it's a whole thing. Everything from the hallway is now being stored in my study, and I've had enough. Couple of things. Number one, I've had my hair cut. I realised in the intro clip my hair is vastly different from how it looks now. It's just the way these things go. Number two, I'm just about to start reading, and I'm actually going to go in a different direction and start with this, build your house around my body rather than this one sky day, just because I feel more in the mood for some historical fiction, and I think this will tick the boxes for me a little bit more. So obviously still going to read all 4 of the books, but I'm starting here and have immediately gone back on what I said in the last clip. I'm just about to head into work. You're balanced on my steering wheel actually, so hopefully it won't be too wobbly, but I wanted to do a really quick reading update because I'm now just over 100 pages into Build Your House Around My Body, and this is definitely not the book that I thought it was or that I was expecting. So from reading the back, and then I guess just my own expectations, I thought that this was going to be literary fiction about our 2 Vietnamese women, one who goes missing in the 80s and one who goes missing in the 2000s, and I thought that there would be some kind of element that would tie them together. That's really not what this is at all. So this is some kind of mad blend of different genres. So we've got some magical realism, we've got some historical fiction, we've got some horror elements, and it's it's just really not what I thought it was. And when we got to the first kind of magical realism element, I was very confused, and I had to go away and look up actually what genre does this book fit into, and it really just sits across all kinds, which is fine, and it's very readable. I'm still enjoying it, although the writing style is quite heavy and intense, and I don't really know what's going on, and I'm not sure whether you're meant to know what's going on or not, or whether, you know, really what is going to happen next. But it's just not what I was expecting. I just had made an assumption really that it was going to be one type of book, and then it turned out to be something completely different. So yes, enjoying it, but we will see. If you can see all the flowers in the background, I'm not some kind of flower fanatic. Every Monday I do a collection for work from a local supermarket of like short date stuff, and they always have loads of flowers, which is really pretty, but can't really feed people flowers, can you? So yes, as I say, I'm heading into work now, but wanted to do an update on this because I was so thrown. Really enjoying it. No idea really what's going on though. Can't really see, but I am somewhat dressed up, about as dressed up as I ever get anyway. James and I are off to an award ceremony this evening. His company have bought a table, and we are off out, but if you can hear the rain, it is absolutely horrendous. It's so miserable. I'm going to try and do this reading update really quickly because we are in the middle of a 2-day heat wave. It's about 38 degrees and honestly wouldn't be complaining if I was sat poolside with a glass of wine and a book, able to chill out, but I'm actually trying to work and it is just so hot. So I'm going to do this reading update really quickly and then go and try and desperately lower my body temperature. So I am about halfway through Careless now, flying through it, finding it really readable, and I'm actually really quite enjoying it as well, which is great. I think primarily because this is set in the late 90s and our main character Bess is a very similar age to the age that I was during this time. So yeah, I'm just finding some of the cultural references and the way that she reacts and thinks about things to be quite similar to my own childhood experience. So I'm enjoying it for that reason as well, but it is just very readable and I'm finding that the author is conveying how Bess feels quite well. So this feeling of how trapped she is and how she just desperately wants to get out, but she's very limited in her choices and in the way that people treat her, and just how that has impacted and shaped who she is as a person. I just think the author's doing a really good job at capturing that and I'm really feeling what Bess is feeling. So yeah, very much enjoying it. I will say that I have one niggle which has come up a couple of times, and that is to do with technology. In particular, our main character Bess. In particular, Bess has a best friend called Ishal who goes to the library and does some research on pregnancy. And then she comes back and they're having a conversation about it, and just some of the ways that they talk about technology is just a little bit modern and progressive. And I remember, giving away my age here, I remember how people felt and reacted to the internet at this time, and it was like this wonderful, amazing thing. We weren't really cynical about it, and just some of the views that they have and some of the ways that they talk about the internet are quite progressive and I don't think very accurate. But I mean, that is me nitpicking. It's such a tiny thing. I'm sure those conversations did happen. I just don't think that teenagers would have had those views. And that really is me being really pernickety about things, because on the whole, as I say, I'm really enjoying it. I'm flying through it. I definitely think if I don't get it finished today, then it will be first thing tomorrow that I will finish it. So I will update you then. Ooh, it's squishy. It's been a bit of time since I last updated you. I've got quite a bit of catching up to do, and I'm going to try and be really concise because I am so warm. I've just come home from work. We're at the end of a second heat wave in the UK and it's been quite stormy weather today, but as a result it's incredibly humid and I'm upstairs and I'm far too hot. So let's jump into it. So I have not updated you in a while, and that is largely because once I finished Build Your House Around My Body, you will know that I went into reading Careless, but I read this one really quickly and I don't think I ever really properly wrapped up this one, and that is largely because I still, even a couple of weeks on, don't really know my thoughts and feelings on this book. I have never read anything like this book. I don't know who I would recommend this book to. I enjoyed elements of it. Certainly when I was reading it, the writing style was really beautiful and I overall found it quite captivating, but it has to be one of the most bizarre reading experiences of my life because it was just this amalgamation of all these different genres and all these different threads of storylines, and it wasn't always clear what was going on or what was going to happen or the purpose of the story that the author was trying to tell or anything like that. And I still don't really know that now. The author does a great job of bringing together all the scattered loose ends and threads that they create throughout the entirety of the book. They do all come together in quite a neat and satisfactory way, but I still couldn't tell you what the purpose of the book is or what it's really about. So we have this young girl, because it says on the back, 2 young Vietnamese women go missing decades apart, but that isn't actually what the story is about. We're primarily following one of these women, and she is fleeing her family in America. She's lived what we guess is quite a strict and structured life, and she wants to sort of have an adventure, spread her wings, be her own self, but even that's not really what the book is about. It's just, I'd be really interested to talk to other people who have read this book and see what they thought, because anytime I sat down and tried to think, okay, this is what the book is about, it's actually not entirely about that. It's also about this and about that and about that, and there are so many different elements and different layers, and it's quite complex and not straightforward at all. And that might be the point of it, but it's I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know who I would recommend it to. As I say, I enjoyed elements of it. I would definitely look to pick up something else by this author because of the writing style, but just a very, very bizarre reading experience. So that was that one. Throw that one on the bed. Then I picked up Careless, and I read this in pretty much a day and a half. It was not a difficult read. Fairly certain that I told you what it was about, but just in case, we've got a young girl in foster care who finds herself pregnant, and it's very much us just having a peek at this young girl's life at this particular snapshot in time. So it's very much a coming of age. It's her dealing with the consequences of her decisions, both leading up to the pregnancy and what she does once she finds out that she's pregnant. It was great. It was nothing groundbreaking or revolutionary in the telling of the story, but it was a fairly enjoyable read. I enjoyed it for what it was. I would give it probably about 3 stars, 3.5 stars. For me, as I know I definitely said earlier, it was more to do with when this was set and how that mirrored my own teenage life, and I liked some of the cultural references that were mentioned in here. So that is that one. And then I picked up Remote Sympathy, which is what I am currently reading, and again, this is a book that I'm thoroughly enjoying and I'm flying through it. I am past the 400-page mark now, so only a very short amount left to read, and really, really enjoying this. And this is where I'm at as of today, and I know I definitely haven't talked about this. So this is historical fiction. It's World War II historical fiction. We are reading from various different perspectives. We have some letters written by a doctor who finds himself imprisoned because he has part Jewish heritage. We have the wife of an SS officer who is living on the edges of a concentration camp. We have the imagined thoughts of the people in the local village nearest this concentration camp, and various other layers going on, and it's basically the story. So the doctor creates a machine that he believes can break down tumours, and then he loses his job because his heritage is discovered to be part Jewish, and the hospital tries to take his machine for themselves. And then the wife of this SS officer becomes ill with cancer, and her husband seeks out this doctor and his machine in order to try and help her. The writing is incredibly beautiful. I do have some questions, and I'm waiting until I finish so that I don't accidentally spoil myself for anything that's going to happen. although obviously I know like the overall picture of what's going to happen. I know what happened at the end of World War II. It's not going to be a surprise for me, but I mean, in terms of within this particular story, how things are going to fall out, I do have some questions about the historical accuracy of some of the things that have gone on, but on the whole it's a very well told and enjoyable story. Enjoyable from the point of view of engaging with the characters and the writing style. Obviously with anything to do with the World Wars and that period in time, it's not like an enjoyable story, like I'm being entertained by the story of all these horrible things that are going on. That's not what I mean. I just mean I'm appreciating the story that the author is trying to tell. This is definitely what I would refer to as a quiet book, in that we're just going along with the story and seeing what happens and meeting our characters and seeing what's going on with them. There's no great sense of tension. We're not building towards some huge event or fallout. It just is the story that it is, but I am thoroughly appreciating it nonetheless. And as I say, for a book that's nearly 500 pages, in fact it's over 500 pages, I have just been flying through this, despite the fact that also I have been incredibly busy at work. Partly why I haven't updated you, because I had a mad 2 weeks where I was basically working 8:30 till 8:30 most days, and I'm absolutely knackered. So yeah, thoroughly enjoying that one. So that's where we're at. Talk to you later. I'm being really lazy and I don't want to come get my camera, but I'm just realising that this is when my iPhone is going to do me dirty and show up all of the new freckles that I have gained today, because it has been really warm. We went to the Ingleton Waterfalls Trail, which was amazing. It was one of Eli's summer bucket list things to do some wild swimming, so we went there for a walk. We were there for about 5 hours. We didn't walk for 5 hours, it's only about 4.5 miles, but just stopping and doing water paddling and the wild swimming and lunch and all of that just kind of made it a very long day. So the dogs are knackered, I am knackered. I've sat down to try and do some reading and honestly just got lost in my phone for about an hour because I'm just tired. Walking in the heat is tiring, I'm just gonna say it. And yes, I have gained lots of new freckles today. So I have now started this one Sky Day. I'm not very far in, I'm about 25 pages. Honestly, just have been unable to concentrate, but I'm gonna try and pick this up and read a little bit more now. As with Build Your House Around My Body, I have somehow, I think, completely misunderstood what this book is actually about. I thought it was a fantasy in which the residents of an island have to relive the same day over and over again. I think that's how I described it. It's not that at all. I don't quite know what it is going to be yet. We are on an island and it seems as though maybe all of the residents have a specific job to do because they all are born with some kind of additional magical ability which they call cause, and it could be somebody having additional limbs or extra strength, or like one of the characters that we've met already, he can add flavour to food with just his hands. So the skills and the magical abilities that they have seem to be quite varied. But yeah, I'm not really sure where I got that synopsis from, but I don't think that it's right. So quite excited now to go in and discover what the book is actually about, and I will update you in due course. Where on earth did this rain come from? Just had to close the window because you can see here where the rain's come in. It's torrential. There is a whole plot point to this book that is like very distressing for me to have to read about, based on something that happened to me when I was a teenager. So in this book, in order to get high, basically the islanders eat butterflies or moths, so like catch them out of the air and eat them, and there are different degrees of like certain butterflies give you more of a high, certain moths give you more of a high. But it is absolutely awful to read about, because when I was 14 or 15 I was asleep and I woke up and there was a moth flying around my face and in my mouth, and it was truly horrendous. And since that point, and it sounds, in the light of day, it sounds like such a daft thing. I'm like, oh, I'm afraid of moths because one went in my mouth when I was a kid. But literally, I am afraid of moths because one went in my mouth when I was a kid, when I was asleep, and I woke up and it was just fluttering in my mouth. And these people are like actually choosing to deliberately eat moths, and it's horrible. And I'm really just not on board with it at all. There was a paragraph, like literally, let me read you this, just this little section. There's just a snapshot of how much they talk about it and how horrendous it is. He took moth every morning and evening. His hunger for it was like the wings, dark and complicated. He left smudges on people, moth shadows on their cheekbones, a dusting of moth cells in women's hair. It's just horrible. It's horrible. Well, this is fun. I was going to do a little update because I'm waiting for Meg to come out of flute, and I have been reading, but oh, here she comes, here she comes. Bit wet, just a bit. So I realised that I never came back and told you what this book was about, and I've only got 30 or 40 pages left now. So before I give my final thoughts, I do want to try and explain what the book is about. And I say try because this has to be one of the most chaotic books that I have ever read, and I just don't know how to adequately capture everything that is going on in this book. So my understanding of what the book was about was definitely wrong, even down to the fact that I don't think that you would describe this as fantasy. I think you would describe it as magical realism. We're obviously on this island, lots of people have additional abilities, we have various different characters that we are following and lots of different things taking place, but we have probably two main characters. We have Xavier, who is the person who can flavour food with his hands, and he has an elevated position on the island. He has a restaurant and people on the island are desperate for him to cook for them because he can sense what a person needs from their food. So he has this elevated position. And then we have Anise, who is a healer, and Xavier and Anise basically had a little bit of a fling, a thing, and then their lives went in different directions, and they're sort of working their way back to each other. I'm pretty confident that that is how the story is going to end, that we're following these two people as various different things are happening on the island, but ultimately they are being brought back together. But as I say, we're following lots of different characters, so one of the big events that's sort of forming the backdrop of everything that's going on is that the governor's daughter is getting married, and that is driving lots of other things to happen. We've got a person leaving challenging messages on walls, which gives the sense that the governor is perhaps corrupt, or there's something just a little bit off taking place on the island, perhaps to do with where the island's wealth and industry is coming from. Loads and loads of different things, and then really bizarre things as well. So at one point, all of the female inhabitants of the island, their genitals, which are called pum-pums, all of the pum-pums just fall out, and you've got some women walking around with them in their pockets. We've got the governor's daughter loses hers. Just like the most random thing to just be thrown into the mix of this story, and I was like, what is going on? But at the same time, It's really readable, it's really enjoyable. I am both listening to the audiobook and reading the physical copy, and would highly recommend the audiobook, especially because there's quite a lot of cultural dialogue in here, in the narration and in the speaking, and I think that it might trip you up a little bit in terms of getting into the flow of the story, whereas to hear it is much easier. It's also very poetic in its writing style, I would say, and in terms of getting the rhythm of the writing style, the audiobook has really helped with that. There's also a very dry sense of humour running throughout, which I have really enjoyed, but I'm not sure whether I would have picked it up had I not been listening to the audiobook, so I would highly recommend the audiobook if you perhaps are struggling with the physical copy of it. But yeah, so it's like this mixed thing where I'm enjoying it, but it's also very chaotic and very bizarre, and I'm not really quite sure how it's all going to come together in the end. I'm assuming that it is. There are loads and loads of different threads of things and themes and plot points and characters, and there's just a whole lot happening. I really hope that it all gets brought together really neatly in the end. No idea if that's going to happen or not at this point, but yeah, so apologies for the radio silence in terms of what this book is about, but maybe that goes some way to explaining why I haven't sat down and filmed this, because genuinely at its heart it's about these two former lovers coming back together, but then there's pom-poms falling out everywhere, people being poisoned, there's like a whole magical sisterhood, priestesshood thing that's taking place, and the governor's son is this other major player, and yeah, there is just there's a whole lot. It's a whole thing, and that is the end of the vlog, if you can believe it. We made it to the end of part 1. 4 very interesting books, 4 very different books, 4 very different reading experiences, but I'm really glad that I decided to do this, because the majority of them actually are books that I would not have picked up had I not decided to do this reading of the long list. So we'll go with them in order. First of all, obviously we had Build Your House Around My Body. What a wild ride this was. Still, even now, 4 books later, don't know my full thoughts on this. I would be really interested to chat with other people who have read it and what they thought about it. It clearly is attempting to do something. I'm just not sure whether it was for me. As I said, I really like the writing style and I would definitely read something else by the author, but I don't know if the actual subject matter or the way it was told was quite for me. I'm not sure. I think I perhaps like a little bit more purpose and outcome to my stories. I don't know. As I say, be really interested to chat with people about it and see what their thoughts were. And then obviously we had Careless, which was a complete contrast to the other 3 books that I picked up, in that it was very quick to read, very obvious what its purpose was, nothing groundbreaking, but just a fairly enjoyable coming of age exploration. Then we had Remote Sympathy, which I never really came and gave my final thoughts on. I hinted that I was perhaps wondering about the historical accuracy of it. That still stands, but I did go away and do some research about the concentration camp at Buchenwald, and I definitely still have some further thinking to do on this. I think partly because the author very deliberately, I mentioned that we get the imagined thoughts of the residents of the nearby village, and the author very deliberately leaves an opening, or something that's open to interpretation, about whether the people in the local village knew exactly what was going on in the work camp, the concentration camp. And there was this whole thing historically which I was completely unaware of. So in terms of providing an educational insight, it was really good because it did make me go away and do some research. The residents were forced, once the camp had been liberated, some of the residents, I think it was 1,000 of the residents, were forced to go and bear witness to what had taken place, and the reactions were quite varied and quite interesting, and there's always been this debate apparently about whether people did truly know what was going on, or whether they allowed themselves to be brainwashed, whether they chose to believe what they wanted to believe, etc, etc. So yeah, quite an interesting position for the author to take. She definitely doesn't put it one way or the other, she leaves it very much open to interpretation. And then obviously just the setting and the period in time itself, as I said at the time, loads of imagery. This is a book that I could definitely see being studied in English. There's just a whole heap going on in here, and I would definitely want to read more from this author. It didn't put me off at all. It's a very quiet book, it's a very slow book. You've obviously got this very horrific, tense backdrop of events happening, but it doesn't necessarily feel like that when you're reading the story. It doesn't feel like you're building towards the liberation of the camp or anything like that. That very much is just going on in the background as you're looking at these characters and you're looking at their traits and the things that as humans we can convince ourselves of, or shut our ears to, or our eyes to, or all of that kind of thing. It's a really good exploration of human nature, of compassion and kindness, and really the degrees of depravity that people will go to as well. So yeah, if you like reading books that explore those kinds of themes, then I think you would appreciate this one. And then obviously we come to the big finale, This One Sky Day, which I think I described it before as one of the most chaotic books that I've ever read. The author does a brilliant job of bringing 98% of the storylines together in a really conclusive, solid way. But there were just a handful of stragglers that we didn't get to find out the reasons why, and I don't know if the author is leaving the door open to go back and write future books set on this island, but there were some things brought up that we just never got to. I'm sorry if you can hear that in the background, by the way. There's some major gasworks being done, and this is the only time that I can film, so apologies for that. But yeah, there were some quite significant topics and themes and plot points brought up that were never concluded, and I don't know why, because a couple of them, in one of our main characters can't seem to conceive and hold on to a child, and it's mentioned numerous times, but we never get to find out why. And it's that kind of thing that I thought would maybe be brought to a conclusion, and it wasn't. But apart from that, really enjoyed it. Thought it was really clever, thought it was great. But what a wild reading experience it was. Truly unexpected. Go into this book as blind as you can if it's possible, because it just is quite a lot of fun and very entertaining. So there you go, they are the 4 books that I read for part 1. Let me know if you've read any of them, and let me know what you thought, especially if you've read any of the ones that I have questions about. I'd love to chat more with you in the comments. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you are all keeping safe and well. Take care, and I'll see you soon.